Thursday, May 18th, 2016. I'd like to call to order Council as a Whole Committee meeting for the purpose of reviewing the fiscal year 2017 budget. Tonight is the first evening of our budget hearings and proceedings. Unless we have objections from councilors, we'll go in the order as specified previously for our budget session calendar. We'll go line by line for each of the individual departments, beginning with assessors. Councilor, I'd just like to remind as well that while I know this is a great opportunity having department heads in front of us, one after another, I'd like to restrict comments and questions specifically to line items and budget-related items. This is certainly a long process consisting of many nights that we'll be spending together with department heads. So I'd just like to make sure we can stay on point and on track and restrict all comments to budget-related items. So my apologies in advance when I try to bring us back to that. That said, the first that we have before us this evening is the assessor's office. Kindly turn to page 11. Mr. Wilson, good evening. Assessor's office, beginning with personal services, chief assessor, the mayor's recommended amount of $91,350. Assessor, $85,243. Data collector part-time, $22,000. Assessor stipend for head clerk, $2,610. Head clerk, $58,308. Principal clerk, $49,434. Longevity, $3,188. Clothing allowance, $600. Chairman's stipend, $1,500, for a subtotal of $314,233. Any comments or questions for Mr. Wilson on the assessor's personal services line? Councilor DiNatale.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is more of a general budget comment, as this is the first one out of the gate. I wrote an email to the finance team and the mayor about the presentation itself. I just want the council to be aware of one important thing. The way you see this presented, as has been presented for the last 9 years, the column FY17 versus FY16, that is not telling you the accurate story of cuts or increases to departments. That is basing FY17's proposal on what they're projected to spend in 16. It's not apples to apples. Finance team knows I'm going to say this. They probably know I'm going to say half of what I'm saying tonight already, because it's a broken record at this point, but they will say it's because the DOR suggests that we budget our next year's account based on what we spend, which I find kind of interesting, because that therefore plays into, well, if a department spends a lot this year, that's the baseline to start with next following year. That's not how it should be going. So the assessor bottom line here says negative $3,450. They didn't get a cut of negative $3,450. They got an increase of $9,450, a 3% increase over last year. And that is prevalent throughout this entire package. So I just want you to be aware of this, that it's not a cut. Assessor got $332,783 this year. They're getting $342,233 next year. Just want to point that out. So Mr. Wilson's department is not getting a cut. They're getting a 3% increase. Thank you.
Other council comments or questions before we move on to expense account? Moving on. Assessor expense, contract services, $2,000. Office supplies, $7,000. Travel and meetings, $3,000. Travel in-state, $3,600. Dues and subscriptions, $2,400. Legal costs and expense, $10,000. Revaluation expense, nothing. Subtotal, $28,000. Councilor DiNatale.
Mr. Wilson, travel and meetings is budgeted for $3,000. The average 4-year spend is $689, and the 8-year average spend is $698. So why do you need $3,000?
We have continuing education and training that we always budget for because we like to go to it. Don't always get a chance to go to it. So if there's a class that is presented for summer school that we really want to go to, we'll make a bigger effort to do it. It's kind of hard to get out of the office to do these things. So what this represents is our desire to do it. Doesn't always follow through with us actually being able to go do the training.
The highest amount that was incurred on this account was in 2015 for $1,600 out of the last 9 years. So it looks like you guys never go. Not a criticism, it's just, it's highly likely you're not gonna go. Is that a fair statement?
With the amount of, the amount of work we do in the office, that, yeah, it's difficult to get out there and do it. I'd love to spend every summer at the Cape, which is, where the week-long class is. It doesn't always happen.
I see that the data collector was increased to $22,000 on the personal services. Could that money for travel and meetings be better spent in that account where you get extra help?
Let me just explain that line item for a minute, even though you didn't ask the question, because it might come up, it might look a little odd. In the past, we've budgeted $8,000 for contracted services and $15,000 for a part-time data collector. So we were paying someone twice the amount of money to contract the service that we were paying an employee. So this budget represents a $1,000 cut over what we've been budgeting for it. And so we've put all that money into, pretty much all the money into the data collector, who's doing a good job at about half the cost of what we used to spend. So that being said, the one employee we have working now is pretty much working as much as he wants to. And so I don't think the $3,000 really helps us.
Thank you.
Council Green.
Well, my question would be the travel in state. What traveling are you doing in state that's different from the travel and meetings that you have $3,000 allotted for?
So the assessors the assessors use their own vehicles, their own personal vehicles to assess. So when myself or Chris are out inspecting houses, we're using our own cars. And so that represents a fee that we get every day that we use our own car.
And can you explain the increase over the past 2 years in the legal costs and expenses from $2,200, $7,500, and now $10,000? Why the legal costs have gone up?
Yeah, again, as Councilor Di Natale said, those aren't the budgeted amounts. So the budget has stayed the same. We've budgeted $10,000 every year. The numbers you see for 2015 and the projected for 2016 are what we actually spent or are going to spend. And so that's sort of money that's there in help of defending values from abatements. So the $10,000 is there if we need it. We have not spent that every year, because we basically fight a lot of the valuation issues by ourselves without using legal.
So then that goes back to if in FY15 the actual cost was $2,240 and the projected for FY16 is $7,500. I mean, that's 3 times as much. So why would there be that much more expected expense?
It depends on how many taxpayers file for abatements and the kind of taxpayer that files for an abatement.
So are we looking for more taxpayers to file abatements and some pretty legal, costly abatements to get done?
No, we actually want less taxpayers to file for abatements. This is where we send a value out, the taxpayer doesn't agree with our assessment, and they challenge it. So this is a defense of our value for all the property in the city. So in any given year, we have a number of taxpayers file for abatements. We handle the majority of those in-house. This money would be available if it was appealed to the appellate tax board, so that we would need representation to, before that board. And so the years that we don't spend the money, it's because we've either stood firm on the assessments or we've negotiated some kind of an adjustment. We try not to spend the money, we try not to go to the ATB if we don't have to, but it's there if we need to.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Tran.
Thank you, Mr. President. I noticed the office supplies line item. Your office never exceeded $5,000 in the last 4 years. For fiscal 2016, you asked for $7,000. We have one more month to go, and you still have $3638 not being used. So I don't expect you're going to exceed $5,000 for this year. You're asking for $7,000 again for next year. I have a feeling that you're not going to exceed $5,000 next year, so it doesn't look like we should budget $7,000 for that line item. So I'm making a recommendation that we reduce that line item by $2,000.
The projected for this year is, the actual for this year is short of one invoice that we're waiting for. IT bought a tablet PC for our assessing software. We haven't received an invoice from them yet. That'll be about $1,400 or $1,500. So,
And that will probably put you about $100, $200 over $5,000, still under budget. For the travel and meetings line item, travel in-state, I think two of my colleagues spoke on that. I do share the same concerns. I'll be generous for travel and meetings. I'd like to see a reduction of 600. Travel in state, reduction of 300. And legal costs and expense. I don't think we have exceeded 7,000 for that line item. What are you expecting to be the actual cost for that?
right, so that's hard to plan because we've already went through all the abatements, and any taxpayer that's not happy with our decision can appeal it. Right now, there's a 90-day window for them to do that. If every one of them appealed, I'm sure we would spend it. If none of them appeal, we'd probably spend very little of it. We have one case from last year still pending. So that money, I look at that money as if it's insurance for our values. If we leave me short there, then what it means is that I have to basically negotiate. Instead of standing firm on a value, I'm forced to negotiate a lesser value because I don't have enough money to defend it if it goes to the ATB. So that's, to me, that's short money. An example is a few years ago, we had a taxpayer. We sent out a bill for $12 million. They filed an abatement. We denied it. They brought us to the ATB. They were saying the building was worth $4 million. So if we did not have the money to defend that before the appellate tax board, that could have cost us $262,000, right? Because I'm going to go to the ATB and I'm going to try to defend my value, but without the support, it's likely that if you put me in a position where I have to defend the values myself without help, that we're going to either, one, negotiate a lesser value for an individual taxpayer, or when we go to court, we'll get crushed. And $10,000 gets eaten up very quickly in value if we have to abate it. So
We budgeted that line item for $10,000 for fiscal 16. We still have $10,000. The last time we spent anything remotely close to that amount was fiscal 2015, which was $2,200. I wouldn't want to put you in that predicament. But do you think we're going to expense $10,000 every year for that line item, or would it be sufficient somewhere between 7,500?
I've looked at this and I've done, if you looked at the amounts that are budgeted, I've already backed off on a few accounts. And so I think that that money is well spent waiting in case we end up with a few filings that we need it. And if I don't spend, I'm not gonna spend it, I'm gonna basically use the internal staff to fight every value I can. And as a last-ditch effort, if someone brings me to the ATB, I need that money. Maybe I need an appraisal on something, and that's gonna, the commercial building needs an appraisal, I'm gonna spend 10 grand on that alone. So,
Now, in the past, when we don't use the full amount budgeted, where does the difference go? Does it go back into the general fund?
yes, yep, free cash. At the end of the year, that money just goes back.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll leave that alone.
Thanks.
Council DiNatale.
Just in the legal cost and expenses, while Counselor Tran is correct to a certain extent, we did spend $15,000 last fiscal year. So, yes, on average, over 4 or 8 years, it looks like we haven't spent anything, average-wise. But then you gotta factor in, well, did we spend a lot last year or 2 years ago? That has to factor in. So the averages are like a starting point, because I saw the same thing. But then when you see one outlier year where it was $15,000 that we spent, and we're budgeting 10, it's possible there's going to be another outlier year in FY17, so you have to prepare for that. So I don't have any problem with that budget amount. My other question here, and maybe this is for Mr. Wilson, maybe this is for who, you know, the document draftees, but I'm also skeptical of the FY16 projected amount. I find that, you know, throughout this whole document, I find those numbers interesting. For example, the data collector, not to pick on that one, but we have spent in that account, with 6 weeks left to go in the fiscal year, $13,198. You take the average burn rate projection to the end of June, and it'll finish at $15,083. So where are we getting that we're gonna spend $22,000 this year? We're gonna spend $10,000 in 6 weeks when we didn't spend $13,000 in 10 and a half months? I'm interested to know the logic behind that, unless the individual doing this work is going to work 400 hours a week until June.
I'm sure I'd like to, actually, but
I'd like to know why it's 22,000. It's not gonna be 22,000. It's gonna be like 15 or 16. But my problem, gentlemen, is the 22 is insinuating to everybody here they're gonna spend 22. They're not gonna spend 22. I know I'm probably nitpicking here, but these are glaring things that I see. So whoever came up with the idea that we're gonna spend 10 grand in 6 weeks, the person doing this must be working 60 hours a day for the next 6 weeks. I have real problems with that column too, because I think that column justifies the appropriation for next fiscal year. You see how next fiscal year it says 22K? Oh, surprise, surprise, we're gonna spend 22K in 16. No, we're not. We're not gonna spend 22K. That's there to justify the 22K for next year.
Council Green.
To Mr. Wilson, my only question would be, do you foresee that Fitchburg's property values are increasing?
yeah, the preliminary analysis for fiscal 2017 shows a modest increase in residential properties and probably a modest increase in commercial industrial properties.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions regarding the accessor expense account? Moving on. Next, we'll have Human Resources, page 9, councilors. Page 9.
Yes.
Beginning with Human Resources, Personal Services, Human Resources Director, $88,271. Confidential Head Clerk, $45,832. Longevity, $1,035. Sick leave buyback, $10,000. Counselor Di Natale.
The additional position,
Yes,
that's a clerk.
that is a clerk's position.
Mr. Stevens, in your opinion, and I'm asking this based on my own experience in the private sector, where I work, we've got 100 people. We've got 2 full-time HR individuals, the director, such as yourself, and then a assistant to the director, but they're an HR specialist. They do a lot of the same things that the director would do, but the director obviously has more management on that, on top of that. I've always felt your department's been understaffed, because how many employees do you oversee? I know there's an HR person in the schools. How many employees do you oversee outside the schools?
About 380.
So there's 4 times the amount of people in the city of Fitchburg that you oversee. In a private company that I work for, and I'm not saying where I work is the standard, but it's an example, they have 2 people for 100. So there's no doubt in my mind this is a short-staffed department, always has been. My problem with the appropriation is I was expecting to see, well, I wasn't expecting to see anything because we can't afford new hires, but would you prefer to have a person of your equivalent in that position or a clerk? Not to denigrate the clerk or lessen what they do, but
Right.
I feel like you could use someone of your caliber who can do more HR-centric work and not just
Right.
clerical activities.
Yeah, I think that probably, this is going to be a transition year for the department. As you'll see, also there's a sick time buyback, which would indicate that Department of One is going to be needing a replacement also. So yeah, I think we should strive to have a higher quality, either clerical or generalist in human resources. Yes.
I think a clerk will help, but I still, I mean, obviously, we'd all like to see certain things, but, ideally, I'd like to see 2 of you there, not just a clerk. Not to belittle the job of a clerk,
Right.
but I mean more HR specialties that can actually do some of the work involving 380 people that you
Yeah.
oversee. So I understand the transition part, I understand why this is being put in there. I would have liked to have seen someone more of an HR generalist or a specialist, but I get it's a transition year.
Well, I think that through the budget process, I can talk to the mayor and come to an agreement on maybe a little bit higher level position in this slot.
Because I don't question the necessity for new hires. I never have, because it's justified here, it's justified everywhere. But I would hope that the finance team would not be encouraging the executive office of hiring more people when we can't afford what we have right now. So, we all like to see more people. I'd like to put an addition on my house, but I don't have the money for it. And I don't know how the council will go with this because the position is needed, but I have a problem with hiring more people when we don't have the money to do what we're doing right now. The budget's out of balance by 1.5 million, maximum. Finance team will disagree with me on that because, we're all accountants, we can, but I'm just telling you right now, I want these positions, if they're put in here, to be sustainable. Not this year, next year, or in 2 years, 10, 15 years from now. So, and that's a criticism I've had since I've been on this council. So I sound like a broken record to some of the people up here, but I hope that there is a give and take with these additions. Thank you.
Any other counselors wishing to speak to the personal services line? Seeing none, we'll move on to the human resources expense. Advertising, $300. Office supplies, $700. Travel and meetings, $375. Dues and subscriptions, $500. Training, $3,000. And printing, $750 for a subtotal of $5,625. Questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you.
Next, we have Law and Legal Department. Mr. Busateri. Page 10, my apologies, councilors. Beginning with personal services, city solicitor, $94,000, assistant city solicitor, $62,000. Any questions or comments regarding personal services account? Seeing none, we'll move to
I have a general comment.
Counselor
Just to- Just to let the council know, again, FY '17 versus FY '16 says the law office is getting a $15,000 cut, they're getting a $5,000 cut. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to legal, labor and mediation. Code enforcement special counsel, unfunded. Damages, persons and property, $15,000. Litigation and special counsel, $8,000. City solicitor labor supplement, $37,000. Arbitration mediation, $1,000, for a subtotal of $61,000. Questions or comments? Seeing none, move on to legal expense. Administrative support, $35,650. Registry and other fees, $1,500. Filing fees, $1,000, for a subtotal of $38,150. Councilor Green.
The administrative support, is that a part-time person or a full-time person in that role?
So the administrative support is split between Attorney Goldstein's office and my office. My office receives approximately receives $1,400 a month towards administrative costs. My full-time person that I employ in the office, that's assigned to a number of duties, primarily her being my municipal law person, this probably covers the cost of her health insurance. So it's very difficult to say that that's even a part-time position. So one of the things that I've done, if you notice in the budget, is I've collected different categories and increased the administrative support person, just for the reasons that I'm explaining to you. The office supplies, the travel and meetings, the dues and subscriptions, legal costs and expenses, and the Westlaw research categories have all been brought to zero, and the administrative support has been brought up for that reason. So in that, coupled with our new policy of receiving income for legal services through the law department, I'm hoping to expand on that position and in an effort to almost self-fund it. So for example, we constantly as a city are approached by different entities that want to come and do business with the city that requires some more complicated contracting, if you will. When the situation is appropriate, the law department now has a new policy of requesting a retainer payment, and those services are billed at a typical law firm's hourly rate. My firm's is $250 an hour. Those funds are then transferred to directly or via my trustee IOLTA account to the city auditor's office. Yeah, and it's unfortunate, and I apologize for not putting a line item on my proposed budget, but I am optimistic that we'll receive about $20,000 or maybe $25,000 over the course of next calendar year or fiscal year towards costs. So you have that there as well. To date, I think we went through this. We've received approximately, we have in hand about $4,500. We expect to receive by the end of this fiscal year some additional funds as well, maybe $7,000 to $10,000.
So the goal then would be to self-support this position?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
In the event that we were able to have an in-house person to dedicate themselves solely to the support of the law department.
Solicitor Pusateri, are you, you're then inferring that a fee will be charged by the legal department to either residents or businesses looking to engage with the city? Is this in essence a fee structure that you're establishing?
No, and it's in essence, it would be as if I was taking a private matter in. So for example, the best example is we had to negotiate a pilot agreement with a solar company that wanted to come in at a particular residence. We've executed that contract, so that's now done. I specifically requested a retainer of $2,500 on that case. What I do is my ordinary course is I keep a handwritten timesheet on my desk, which accounts for the time that this other company's project cost the city, as far as my time, and they receive a statement each month which gives them a breakdown of what service I've supplied to them, how much time I've spent on that service, and then the corresponding charge. So to say it's a fee schedule, I think connotates in my mind that there are off-the-shelf fees for different types of services that people are looking for. So that's how we were going to do it. And in fact, it's the type of thing that I'm simply requesting. I have received only a positive response. Nobody said no at this point in time. So I think it's an opportunity for us to generate some revenue. I'd obviously be arguing in the future, not in this particular budget, that it should be spent on that person, but this is money that's just going into the general fund to be budgeted according to the mayor's budget and to council's pleasure.
Mr. Solicitor, I certainly like this idea, particularly any revenue-generating item or stream. My only concern here is typically the council agrees to any fee structures or changes, implementations imposed by the city upon its residents or businesses, much like a building permit or any other comparable permitting or fee structure. My only concern, and I would typically defer to our city solicitor for this, is just making sure that if the city is obligated to vote on this and discuss this, deliberate it more thoroughly, that it's just not an arbitrary fee structure set up and it will change from solicitor to solicitor moving forward.
It's a matter of contracting with each individual party. However, your point is well taken, and maybe perhaps we'd be better informed to file a petition on it. Matter's been reviewed with not only the mayor's office, but with our auditor's office, and we felt comfortable moving forward without it. But with your direction, we could file a petition if that's.
Thank you. Okay. Councilor Joseph?
Just a quick question. Are you a city employee or are you a contracted employee?
I'm a city employee.
Okay.
And Mr. Councilor Joseph, none of those fees are coming into the office. If they do touch the office, they touch my trustee IOLTA account, and then in order for me to remove money from that account, I have to generate a statement to the party that made the payment. They have an opportunity to review that statement, make an objection to it perhaps, and then after a short period of time, I'm able to turn that money over to the auditor's office.
Thank you.
Councilor Vitale?
Solicitor, you said that you were a city employee, but do you currently take health insurance benefits from the city?
No, I don't.
Do you intend on doing that?
There's been a discussion at the House, but my inclination is to stay with our current health insurance plan.
I mean, that's your personal decision, but
Council, I don't know that we're allowed to discuss individuals' health benefit package and their
I didn't ask for his health benefit package.
You
I asked if he
he's
collects
taken-
health insurance from the city. It's a legitimate question.
You know what, I have no problem with you asking the question. The answer is no, I'm not collecting health insurance.
Well, I'm asking because I want to point out that there's a savings here, because I have advocated privatization of legal services for years, and I believe that both pension and health insurance expenses are not being incurred with the current solicitor, so that to me is a savings long-term, and I just wanted to point that out. I apologize if I put you on the spot, sir, but I wanted to point out the fact that because I've been so critical in the past, some might, viewing in the audience or at home, might say, well, why doesn't he say anything about this now? Because of what you just said. We're not incurring those costs. So technically, as I see it, you are a contractor, really, because we're not incurring those costs. And consider me maybe a Scrooge, but hopefully that continues. Thank you.
Any other councilors wishing to address legal expense? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Solicitor.
Thank you, Council.
We'll move on to treasurer and collector, page 14, for parking, and then we'll move to page 7. Folks, good evening. We'll begin with parking, personal services. Parking control supervisor, $44,162. Parking control officer, $35,810. Longevity, $1,034. Overtime, $2,000. Clothing allowance, $1,250. Less meter and garage receipts, $84,256. For a line total, for a subtotal of $0. Councilors with questions? Councilor Green?
I just want to make sure that I understand this, that all of your personal services expenses are covered by what you collect in the meters and the garage currently, correct? Is that how that's being read?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other further questions before we move to parking expense? Councilor Joseph?
It's parking expense, sorry.
Moving on to parking expense, parking fines, collection supplies, $10,000, automobile, $4,000, parking contract services, $15,000, parking utilities, $30,000, parking building supplies, $7,000, parking equipment and repair, $5,000, parking building repair and maintenance, $30,000, parking snow and ice, $20,000, less meter and garage receipts, $121,000, for a subtotal of $0. Councilor Joseph?
Where is the 9 million, the money that was being borrowed now to repair the garages? Isn't that going to be paid back out of this budget?
It would be paid out of a future budget. We have not borrowed the money yet. And I don't anticipate there being a pay down at least until fiscal 18, which is the budget after this one, possibly a year after that.
Is that because you're not going to be doing the work this year?
It takes time to do the work, and we won't have any work started before June 30, so I don't have to borrow the money prior to June 30, which means I have another year before we can borrow. Before I have to borrow, and then a year after that before I would have to make a pay down.
Okay.
Councilor Green?
Do we have the possibility of making money in this department in our meter and garage structure? Sorry, Mr. Brooks.
I guess I would answer you, we're not supposed to make money because the fees we charge is supposed to be sufficient to cover our expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, I would say we could probably do some things that generate more. If we had more revenue, we could do some more things. We're not at a point where we would be generating more than we spend. The $900,000 loan order will have to be paid back. I anticipate that would come out of parking meter and garage receipts, but I'm not sure that we're going to cover all of it to the very end. It depends on what happens. If we have to replace meters or add meters, I'm being told by my staff that we're at a point of having to order additional parking meters because we've used up the stock that we have. They're very good about recycling old ones and so on, but we're at a point where we need to buy some. I was not present last night. I understand there was a change that was approved on Main Street, and if part of that was angled parking, and if that requires meters, additional meters? No. Okay. So just replacing the meters that we have. At some point, I'm going to need to replace meters and so on.
And have we, have you, this is not a criticism, have you forward thought about the digital meters that, they don't take actual quarters, but actually will swipe a credit card or a debit card or
Yes.
something a little more modern?
Yes. As you know, the two park and pay machines at the Main Street garage and the Putnam garage were vandalized. I had my staff look at putting meters in at Putnam on the first level because of the way it's constructed. We could do meters and it wouldn't interfere with plowing or cleaning or anything like that. And I asked specifically for meters that would take credit cards or something like that. I had anticipated a cost of $250 per meter. They were coming in at $600 per meter. And instead of a $10,000 project, I was looking at a $30,000 project. So it can be done, but there's a cost to it. On that particular situation, I've asked my staff, and they've come back with a proposal for 2 park and pay machines that take only credit cards or debit cards, no cash. And those machines are actually a little bit under $10,000 a piece installed. So I think that's the direction I'm going to go. We have to have some discussions about how we connect to the internet or whatever, whether that's through cell phone service or Wi-Fi service or something like that. So I am moving with those 2 machines. In terms of meters within town, I think it's something that I would like to do, but it's maybe a couple of years down the road if we do some kind of a Wi-Fi network in the downtown area. Then it becomes much more cost effective because the meters could just get onto the Wi-Fi network that's already in place, rather than me having to create some kind of a communication network.
Right, I'm sorry, did you say that you have the capacity now for Wi-Fi?
No, we do not.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure that I heard that so that when we get Comcast before us, we can say, you know, in moving forward, we're going to need Wi-Fi to connect to our park and pay meters.
Right, right. My understanding is at some point down the road, you know, communities are doing Wi-Fi networks in their downtown areas. I'm technically challenged. This is my flip phone.
Oh, boy.
Yes, I know how to text.
Oh, boy. I was going to say, there's downtowns that have had Wi-Fi for 10 years.
Okay, but I think if that's in place, then that saves a lot of annual maintenance on connectivity and all that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Brooks, I see a parking utility cost decrease. Is this a result of an LED conversion? How can you explain
Yes.
the continued decrease?
Yep. I guess about a year ago, we started a project of converting all the lighting at both garages to energy-efficient LED lights, for the most part, LED lights. And that's significantly dropped our utility bills. I think the payback on that project for our costs, Unitil had a rebate on it, and we had some cost. I think our cost, we're making it back in about a year's time.
40% cost reduction.
So that's, it's a very good savings and superior lighting from what had been there. The other item I just point out is the line above it, contract services did go up. That's because about a year ago we started using handheld ticketing devices for the 2 parking people in my department to write tickets, and so there's a cost of processing those tickets that we didn't have before. However, it's made the enforcement much more efficient.
I have a question regarding the parking fines collection supplies. You see, once again, budgeted for $10,000, which is consistent with prior years. However, to date, as of the end of April, you had $9,200 available. I haven't seen that you've hit anything beyond $4,650 in the past few years. Why do we have $9,200 available, and what do we plan to do with $10,000 next year? That's different from what we've done past years.
I believe that's where we have paid for our tickets, the physical tickets. We're not generating as many on our end. We do have ticket books for the police department. They still handwrite out the tickets. Money not spent there goes into the, either closes back to the general fund or goes back to the reserve account for the parking meters, parking meter fees.
Okay. But typically, like to see if we're typically transferring in excess of 5,000 to another line item. I'd prefer to just see us budget it against that line item,
Yes.
instead of maintaining a continued surplus.
Yeah.
That said, I'd recommend a cut of $5,000 to the parking fines collection supplies. Councilor Joseph.
What do you anticipate to be your reserve account balance by the end of the year?
The account usually has just over $400,000 in it at the end of the year, from which the council has appropriated between 220, I think, and 250,000.
220?
Yep. So then there's just over 200,000 left once that transfer is made.
Councilor, is that it?
Yeah.
Any further questions for Mr. Brooks? Seeing none, we'll move to page, you're not off that easy. We're off to page 16, tax collection and treasury, personal services. Treasurer collector, 97,614. Assistant to treasurer collector, 85,243. Principal accounting clerk, $55,019. Senior accounting clerk, I imagine that's multiple, $146, $630. Systems administrator stipends, 0. Longevity, $5,174. Overtime, $3,000 for a subtotal of $392,680.
And just, you are correct, the 146,630 is for 3 of my staff. 3.
Thank you. Questions from councilors? Seeing none, I'll move on to tax collection and treasury expense. Office supplies, $15,000. Travel and meetings, $1,200. Dues and subscriptions, $1,000. Educational benefits, $2,000. Postage, $80,000. Insurance, $5,100. Bank service charges, $18,200. Treasurer data processing, $120,000 for a subtotal of $242,500. Councilor Di Natale.
Mr. Brooks, would you explain the projected figure for FY16 for office supplies of $15,000 when through last week we've spent $4,000? Are we going to spend? We're going to spend $11,000 in the next 6 weeks.
I guess I would answer you at this point, no, probably not. It would depend on if we have a major expense on it.
Can I ask who provided that projection?
That's a projection I would have done, and as you were asking the questions earlier, I was reviewing my projections. And some of what's gone on is these projections were generated back in January when we presented our budget figures. So at that time, in certain cases, you know, we're expecting, we're either expecting to have some expenses or expecting or wanting to reserve some funds in case there is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I get the
They're
projections. I
projections.
know they're not etched in stone,
Right,
but
right.
what's interesting in what you said about it being back in January, it would probably behoove the city to have a update on that projection in April or something before this gets to us, so it'd be maybe a little more accurate, because I'm not asking because I'm thinking of cutting it per se. I just want the council to understand the document says they're gonna spend $15,000, and then the FY17 number differential is based on that $15,000, when there's no way they're gonna spend $15,000. And normally, if it's $1,000 off here or there, no big deal, but we're talking $11,000, almost 3/4 of the budget. And my comments on this and others is not to criticize a department head for not spending what they're getting. It's just, considering the tight constraints we're under, and I get if it doesn't get spent, it goes to free cash, my push on this is to suggest, well, geez, could that 11,000 or 5,000 even be better budgeted somewhere else because quite frankly, I'd rather have less free cash than more free cash, because more free cash usually means we gotta use it to balance the budget. So, something that glaring, I just wanted to point that out, that, we're not gonna spend $15,000 on office supplies, yet that's the basis of the estimate. Thank you.
Counselor Green.
Mr. Brooks, I know that we haven't talked about the tax title foreclosure yet, but I'm wondering if any of those office expenses, knowing that we are doing more work in tax title foreclosure, is some of that expense going to be related to doing more tax title foreclosure? Again, I am just trying to
Yeah.
understand where that.
Right, no, I'm thinking through the answer, and I would say no, that I try and keep that separate. And the expenses I have with tax title foreclosure relate specifically to that. Oh, yeah.
So you really do kind of have an excess of $10,000 in office supplies that
Well,
you.
and I'm going to say, yes, if you're looking at this year, as I look back on prior years, my expenses have been between $8,000 and $10,000. So, all right, if you want to say it's a little excessive, it is, but I'm not sure that it's 10,000 excessive. It is. It can be in looking at it this year. Office supplies is the kind of thing that you can have a year where you don't have a lot of expenses because you're just buying paper and doing kind of routine things, and another year where the calculators all die, the batteries all run out, everything just kind of happens.
Again, I'm just trying to help justify that spread of amount, and then the data processing, that's what generates our, water bill and our tax bill?
The
and-
data processing is covering our Munis support contract. So this is the contract we have with Munis, who provides our municipal software to host the site where the data is kept and to provide support during the course of the year. We are at the end of a 3-year contract, and we've gone out to bid for a new 3-year contract.
Okay, thank you.
Councilors, I'll recommend a cut of $4,000 to office supplies. Any other further questions regarding tax collection and treasury expense? Seeing none, move on to tax title. We have one item, tax title foreclosure, $100,000 for a subtotal of $100,000. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
You got 2 more lines?
2 more lines. Oh, that which page? Oh, okay. Workforce management, workers' comp, systems analyst, 5,400, 863. Payroll and benefits manager, $60,657, for a subtotal of $115,520. Questions from counselors? Seeing none, move on to debt service. Maturing debt, $3,836,000. Long-term debt interest, $450,000. Short-term debt interest, $25,000. Certification costs and ban, $35,000. Subtotal of $4,346,000. No, $4,346,000. Questions or concerns from counselors? Seeing none, at last, thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you.
One more.
Oh, Counselor Joseph, Counselor Joseph.
Calvin, just one, it's not, I don't see it here, and that's why the person that comes in and does consulting to the employees on a monthly basis on their 401Ks and all of that
The
stuff.
457 deferred comp.
What's that?
It's a 457 deferred comp plan.
Okay, so
which is
where-
like a 401K.
Is that,
No.
is there?
No,
is this-
he's a rep for Voya, which used to be ING, which used to be Aetna, and he reps for them, so we do not pay him.
Okay, that's, I was just wondering if there was.
Right,
a
we do not
fee
pay him.
somewhere.
He's a sales rep for them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Next up is auditing, page 12. Mr. Saracen, tough commute.
Yeah.
Auditor Personal Services. Auditor, $119,591. Deputy City Auditor, $85,243. Clerical, .25 FTE, $14,000. Longevity, $2,412. Sick leave buyback, $10,000. Subtotal, $231,243. $246, excuse me. Seeing no questions, move on to auditor expense. Office supplies, $900. Travel and meetings, $3,400. Dues and subscriptions, $1,300. Advertising, $800, for a subtotal of $6,400. Questions by counselors? Seeing none. Audit services, outside audits, $84,000. Actuary service, JSB 45, $9,000. School credit outside audits, negative $29,000 for a subtotal of $64,000. Counselor Joseph?
Dick, I know these are all compartmentalized or departmentalized, but do we know how much the sick leave buyback is costing us in the system for this year? The anticipated?
Well, there's two accounts. There's the personal day and vacation buyback account, which is about $800,000. The sick leave buybacks, usually it relates to a retirement, and it would be specific every year to whomever retires. And I would have to go back and calculate it off the status C, and it could change every month. At year end, I could give you a better figure.
So you don't know on average of what?
Oh, on
that
average?
costs us?
And let me just say, the general fund is one area, but if it's water, wastewater, airport, they would pay their own, so
Yeah.
it comes out of their budgets. So it varies based on the number of retirements.
How about in the school department?
The school, they may have small amounts, more for the clerical or the support staff, because I think they used to have substantial amounts for the teachers, but I believe they negotiated that out, and now they pay them longevity.
Okay.
Counselor Di Natale?
Mr. Saracen, how long have we used the same auditing firm?
I would say about 12 to 15 years. It was done in a joint bid with Leominster.
Would you disagree that it is prudent on any institution, public or private, that they rotate their audit firms every few years?
It is a good practice to have different auditors, and this question's come up in the past. One of the things with municipalities, it is a common practice, what we do. One of the benefits of this firm is they know our system, so they have more time to spend auditing we have many tentacles. We're a big city. They go out, they'll do the airport, the water department, wastewater, get into the sewer rate relief debt, more so than any new firm coming in. One of the things you also want to consider is the to plan it, you know, if you get a new firm, you gotta kind of train them on how, you know, how the systems work in the city. So, that requires effort on the, you know, the staff to spend more time with new auditors. One of the ways they work around this is the managers of the audits do vary within that firm. So we see different faces every few years. But it is I asked, and they said it's very common that they audit the same communities. They do have a very strong expertise in municipal, unlike other auditors. And let me just say that we do get audited by many firms. We get audited, the retirement system gets audited every 3 years by PERAC. They come out, the state. HUD, they audit the block grant program every couple years. The MWPAT, they audit all the bills before they reimburse the city. The FAA, the airport, they audit all of the bills on these projects before they reimburse the city. The Department of Revenue, they've come out not only for the reviews they did of the financial you know, status of the city and how we operate, but they also, at the end of every year, they come out and they do a review of the financials, my audited financials, all the balance sheets and financial records. So, and then also at the school department, Mass Division or Department of Education, they come out and audit the schools. One of the things is to recognize is if some of these other agencies audited, you know, found major problems and the auditors didn't, then I would agree that something's not right. I remember we had a school building, you know, I've experienced with about 4 or 5 different firms in my career, and I know this firm audits a lot stronger than other auditors that we've had, and we've had big 8s. We had, you know, big 8 firms at the time.
Besides Heath and Melanson, are there other auditing firms that audit municipalities?
Yes, there are.
How many?
I don't know. At our size, I would say there's probably 3 or 4 that are, or maybe more. I'm not sure that could take on the city. There are other smaller firms.
So,
but it is an option.
But the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board has floated that idea about rotation of audit firms because of complacency, because of what have you. And I'm not insinuating anything, but to have the same firm look at our books for 12 to 15 years, in my opinion, is most likely because it's just the easy thing to do instead of going to a different firm, because as you said, it would cause more work on your office's part. I know you guys have a lot to do,
right,
but there are 4 or 5 other public accounting firms that do municipalities, so it's not like you'd be conducting on-the-job training on day 1 with these people. I'm sure they would have some kind of a foundational understanding of what to expect. Now, obviously, there are some things you would have to get them apprised of, but I think it's because it's been such a topic of discussion at the federal level and state levels that it's to weed out complacency and get another set of eyes to look at our books and give them 4 or 5 years and then rotate. Heck, rotate back to Heath and Melanson, but I believe it's long overdue that this city has a different set of eyes look at our books. And in my opinion, I know we probably will disagree on this, saying that it's because of we have to do more work to have a new set of eyes come in, I don't think that's a justifiable reason not to have a different set of eyes look at our books. Considering that, I can understand if Heath and Melanson's the only one that does it. There are other companies that do it, so it's not like that they're fresh off the dock. They don't understand what they're looking at. I think we're well overdue. 12 to 15 years. I think it would help the city. I'm encouraging the city to have different auditing firm look at our books for a few years and then rotate. It's not bad policy. It's actually encouraged by many entities. So I would hope that the city next year or the year after seriously consider and approach that avenue and not rely on the same audit firm for 2 decades. Thank you.
Counselor, I certainly agree with you. I just ask that we try to direct comments to specific lines on the budget and the cost associated with them. That's all. Counselor Green?
Is it safe standard operating procedure that we keep the $10,000 in the department for sick time buyback?
Yes. That's a contractual item. Based
Okay.
on a retirement, I'm planning to retire next spring.
Oh.
So that would be my buyback.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Donnelly?
Thank you. I just want to comment that when I was on the council before, either 8 or 10 or 12 years ago, it was brought up about changing the auditing company. And I know that Councilor Connery in the past also brought it up. So it has been brought up for quite some time, but we still do it the same way. Thank you.
Any other questions regarding auditing services? Seeing none, move on to page 42, employee benefits. Employee benefits. Pension. $15,000. That's pension non-contributory. Pension contributory, $10,200,000. Workers' compensation, $350,000. Unemployment, $220,000. Health insurance, $13,640,000. Life insurance, $280,000. FICA, $930,000. Other benefits, $800,000. Chapter 41 police, $70,000. Chapter 41 fire, $70,000, for a total of $26,575,000. Questions, concerns? Counselor Di Natale. Counselor Di Natale?
The employee benefits account, specifically pensions, is concerning because it's going up another $550,000. That $550,000 is going to continue in perpetuity until 2032, and we're aiming to be fully funded. Our pension account eats up half of our new revenues. It's gone up by 50% since 2008. And if you project that forward in 5-6 years, it'll go up another $5 million. So the more we rely on state aid, the more we rely on property taxation to the max, this account's gonna kill us. It's clear as day, the train's coming. And I'm saying this because the city has poorly funded this account for years. We're playing catch-up. That's why it goes up by $600,000 every year. So when I hear that we are financially strong, we are anything but. When 75% of our new revenues are taken up by pension and health insurance, it leaves nothing, no room to do anything else. So the taxpayer at home, when they see an annual bill that's more than what it was last year, they can take it to the bank knowing that 75 cents of every dollar they have taken out of their pocket is going to subsidize employee benefits. Now, the pension account, we can't get away from. It's a mandate. The health insurance should scare everybody. We do a pay-as-you-go system. So this $13.6 million, that account, I know we've had decreases recently. We owe $128 million in unfunded liabilities, and that number will grow. We have nothing put aside. I know we put $250 in there, but that's a pittance. It's nothing. So the reason why, and I think Councilor Joseph brought this up a couple of years ago, and it's a good question, because a lot of municipalities ask this. Why should we be concerned about it now if the state isn't concerned about it? And the reason we should be concerned about it is, if health insurance goes up 5, 6, 7, 8% every year, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars that we have to take from our revenues to cover it. We have no money set aside, because that $128 million, that's what we owe on the books today. We don't have anything set aside for it. So the OPEB trust fund is there to draw off of, to support these increases and not rely onto the existing revenue stream. That's why it's concerning, because the more this account grows, the more it's going to eat into our general reserve, general revenues. So it's just gonna keep growing and growing and growing. Between the two of them, it's $24 million. That's over almost a quarter of the operating budget. It's unbelievable. City of Fitchburg's on the hook for $258 million right now. And these two accounts are why I continue to say the city is in major trouble. I know everybody else kind of is, but I don't really care about everybody else. You know, it's time that we start making tough decisions, and one of those tough decisions is hiring freezes, period. But I don't think that'll ever happen. On the health insurance, Mr. Saracen, you indicated to me in a face-to-face a couple weeks ago that this account's short $250,000?
Yes, based on our projections, it was requested, I worked with Calvin, the treasurer, we agreed, and the estimate provided by our consultant was around 13.9. We could maybe get along with 13.8, but it's been cut to 13.640. So we presume that, it's assumed that we'll probably need money in that account. That's the one account that it clearly shows that we will probably be short.
Mr. Saracen, you said that it was cut. It was increased by $440,000. Are you saying that it was, the cut is the 13.9 actuary report versus what you're getting for funding? The budget this year is 13.2. Next year it's 13.6.
But there's a supplemental of 300, there's a supplemental appropriation that the council hasn't voted on yet.
That's right, yep.
That'll come before finance next week, that increases that account by over 300,000, I believe, 320. So what are we're at around 13,520.
So we can make a case then that account is underfunded by 260,000, give or take.
Yeah, I think that's give or take, yes.
There's your free cash next year. So back to my earlier comment about the budget not being in balance. We're using overlay surplus, that's right off the gate. We're out of balance there. Now we underfund this account 260,000. There are other accounts we've made up for, which I'll get to at another time when we have those budgets before us, which is a good thing. But you add this 260 that we know of today, plus the overlay surplus, we're in the hole $1 million. Thank you.
Council Caddy.
Dick, once a year, do the employees re-sign for their health benefits, what policy they're going to have?
Yes, and the mayor and the treasurer are with Bernie Stevens, the HR. They work with the PEC, the Public Employee Committee, and they voted to extend for one more year with no rate increase.
Okay, and how many different types of policies are there between individual and family? Used to be Blue Cross,
About
Blue
5,
Shield.
I think.
I don't really need the question answered. I just want to try to get to the real question.
Is there about 5?
I would say there are 3 major plans.
Okay, when I was working for the city when I was younger, there was no explanation to me as an employee on what would be the best health policy that I could get, or what would be good for my family. Older now, my children have left, and now it's just my wife and I. So there's never been anybody on the city that would explain to me which policy I should take. Now, I think that the city pays 75% of most of the employees, and the employee pays 25%. On the average, I think, let's say the average individual's paying $500 for their policy, but the city's picking up $1,500 a month. Suppose for a minute that someone has health insurance, more health insurance than they need. And so that employee decides to drop down to a policy that costs $300. They'll save $200. The city will save $600 a month. And I can tell you, in all the years I worked for the city, no one ever came to me personally and explained to me what was right for me. I see a huge savings here. If someone on the city would contact our 362 employees for the city, plus you have the school teachers, and retrofit the right health insurance for their family, because we may be wasting an awful lot of money. both individually and also for the city. To me, those numbers would add up incredibly. Just a statement. Thank you.
Council Green.
Well, my question does kind of piggyback on that, every year we know that health insurance is going to go up, and we as a family, meaning just Brian and myself, choose to stick with a plan that our premium isn't outrageous, our deductible is mid-range, and, we, may choose to get dental coverage one year and not the other, but I don't know if that would be a city obligation to provide that information or not. I mean, I would like to think that we're well-informed consumers, but I would like to do, what's good for me as a family, but also maybe some savings to the city as well. So I guess a comparison on the different plans would be helpful, and I know companies that say, here's the plan that the city offers, take it or leave it. So I don't know if we're to the point, but the fact that that these account for more than half to 3/4 of our new revenue is scary on that realization that we'll never get that bill paid with our obligation as it stands right now. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move to miscellaneous expenses. General insurance, $690,000.
President, do you know what page that is, please?
Excuse me?
Page number?
Still on 42.
Same thing.
Next section down, Counselor.
Yep, thank you.
Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, $12,500. MMA dues, $7,500. Montechusett Home Health Care, $2,000. Johnny Appleseed Center, $50,000. Civic Days room tax, $0. Memorial Day, $4,000. Veteran holidays, $1,400. Disabilities Commission, $1,000. Medicaid billing commissions, $30,000. Civic Days, $18,000. Holiday decorations, $5,000. For a total miscellaneous expenses of $821,400. And Council, just to clarify into the public, the first Civic Days item that I read was the 5% room tax. That was $0. Councilor Boschman.
Hey, Dick, how come we're paying Johnny Appleseed to $50,000 from $32,000?
Mayor, the question was directed.
I can respond to that, Councilor. The new approach in the city is to market the city. The Johnny Appleseed Trail Association, as part of the Chamber of Commerce, has committed to me, as the Chief Executive Officer, to increase our marketability within the region. And I think that's important. We garner a great deal of, I'm happy to report, and I think you all know, revenue from Great Wolf. We're raising significantly more than we ever have before. And I think to increase this line item by $18,000 is money well spent. And as I mentioned, the president of the chamber, who's here this evening, Mr. Nascimento, has committed that we will get a return on that $18,000. And we will be marketed in a different way than we have in the past, and I think that's important.
Mayor, but my question is this: how do we know we're getting a return for our money? I mean, can they tell us we're getting a return for our money? I mean, Leominster's got 3 hotels or 4 hotels. We got 1, and we pay more than Leominster. I mean, and it's the same. I just want to make sure that I'm getting something for my buck.
Right, and
I mean, how can I judge it?
I knew you would ask that, Councilor. I can tell you that we will be. We will be, because it's a partnership with the chamber that I think is important. I think the chamber directs a lot of how we do as a region and a city. And again, for $18,000, I think that's a bargain. And you have to trust me, as I'm trusting the chamber, that they're going to deliver on their commitment. And I believe they will. Mr. Nascimento is here this evening. If you'd like him to respond to how specifically we're going to be benefited by this, I'd be more than happy to, if that's all right, Mr. President.
Do councilors have questions that they'd like to hear from Mr. Nascimento, or are they all set?
Well, I got a question.
Counselor, is that a yes?
Yes, I get a question, sorry.
Okay. Mr. Nascimento, if you'd please join the mayor.
Thanks, Dick.
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening. Councilor Boishman.
See, I look at things differently. I look at the Chamber of Commerce as the Chamber of Commerce is supposed to be working for the surrounding area, and Fitchburg included. And I, forget me as a counselor, but I as a person, think for the last couple of years, the Chamber of Commerce hasn't helped Fitchburg at all. And then you come back and you ask me for more money. I want to know what my $32,000 gave me for last year, besides putting my name in the book, because I can see it.
So, Counselor, that's a good question. First of all, I want to distinguish that I'm here today representing JADA, and there's a distinction between JADA and the Chamber. So JADA is the Johnny Appleseed Trail Association. It's a separate organization. It is focused on destination marketing and on economic development, specifically around tourism. And we view tourism as economic development, recruiting people, helping market the area, helping market Fitchburg through a regional strategy, driving visitors with a little jingle in their pocket to come out here to Fitchburg and surrounding communities has an economic impact. And you asked about the return on investment. I do have some data here that we'd be happy to show that does show the impact to Fitchburg, and it's a pretty substantial impact. Fitchburg has derived about $25 million a year in tourism in terms of economic impact. Payroll, that represents about $5 million in payroll, about 188 jobs. State taxes about 1.3 million, and local taxes about 600,000 in local taxes. As the mayor mentioned, local rooms tax revenues, which is probably one of the key indicators of the impact of tourism, has grown substantially. From 2013, it was 131,000. Then in 2014, it was about 50,000. And then in 2015, it's nearly $1 million. And currently for fiscal year 2016, it's projected by the Department of Revenue, which it uses very conservative numbers, at about 650,000. But again, they're very conservative. So, that's distributions to date, excuse me. So I want to introduce Patrick Lawler from our team, who's also here today. So I have a lot of this data here. I'll also show you data that we have that we've collected from the other communities within our service area. And Fitchburg, by far, has the most to gain from tourism. Just the rooms tax revenue is nearly $1 million, as I just mentioned. You mentioned other communities. You mentioned Leominster having more hotels. Leominster collected $281,000 versus nearly $1 million from Fitchburg. It's important to note the role that JADA has. We're marketing Fitchburg, and we're marketing the region to visitors outside of the area. We're more than just the visitor center. We're more than just that guide and that little ad that you mentioned. We're at trade shows. A lot of business happens at trade shows, so we're going to trade shows, industry trade shows, promoting the area to group tour operators. We're hosting fam trips, bringing in travel writers. We hosted one this past year that we had great results with. We have another, an Italian travel writer coming to the area next week that we'll be hosting and bringing around to some of our local attractions. Anytime one of those travel writers generates any kind of stories or coverage of our area, that is money and jobs for Fitchburg. We also do a lot of media buys in our target markets. We've done a lot of research, so we know exactly who the consumer is that's coming to our area, and we're trying to target our marketing around those consumers. So we know where they're coming from other New England states, from Connecticut, New York, Rhode Island, New Hampshire. We get a lot of visitors from Boston, so we want to continue to target them, and we're getting some from Canada as well. So I hope that helps answer that.
Could I get a copy of that after?
Sure, I have copies here. I'd be
Please.
happy to pass those out.
There any other questions for Mr. Nascimento? Council Green?
I would like to say that I've always been a fan of the Chamber of Commerce, and I know that you're here talking about Jada and the great work that they do, and that the regional breakfast on the impact of tourism was hugely successful and hugely eye-opening when we attended that, and we actually saw the figures that tourism is a business that we're missing out on. So I appreciate the fact that you have been, and your organization has been, a real stakeholder in opening our eyes, so to speak, on the market that we've been missing. And I hope that I know as a matter of fact that we won't miss that any further with your help and the help of Jada. And I do think it's important that, counselors, if you get an opportunity to go to the chamber-funded events or the breakfast on regional tourism, that's where all these questions would have been answered for you. But it is, I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you and find out how we, not only as a region, but how Fitchburg can help you better do your job to market us and to put a stamp on, what we own. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to own fall here. I know that's going to be our catchphrase, is that we own fall. So we have to work collaboratively on that. And I know that you've got organizations that are involved with the chamber that are doing that. So I applaud and commend the effort that you do, and I look forward to that. I look forward to that number actually growing, because that's a huge return on investment. That's a return on investment that I personally would make if you were giving the return of an increase of $18,000 to make $1 million in revenue. I would take that return.
Thank you, Counselor. I want to just add that, and I mentioned this before to the council, Jada and the work that we do, we're really a partnership, and we like to use the analogy that we're a three-legged stool. So we have the state that contributes money from the rooms tax revenue that the state collects from our local hotels. They'll give us a portion of that to help fund our tourism initiatives. Our local communities that collect rooms tax revenue also contribute some funds that help us operate the visitor center and help us do the good work that we do. And then we have local stakeholders, local businesses that are involved in tourism that help contribute. And it's a very strong partnership that we have with the city, and I hope that that partnership continues. I hope it continues to grow. I want to applaud the mayor for his commitment to economic development and really bringing in new visitors and new dollars to the community. And I want to thank the council for your commitment as well in the past. I hope this partnership continues.
Thank you.
Council Caddy.
Thank you. I believe that Johnny Appleseed supports all of our public entities with civic days and so on. What I'm not so sure about is what effect they have on business. Have they increased business for the businesses in Fitchburg? The problem I've always had with Fitchburg contributing, Leominster and I believe Westminster, is that the other communities don't contribute, and they get the same service that we do. I noticed last year, or it was the year before, that the city of Gardner put in a full-page advertisement for their businesses. I'm sure they paid for that ad. Fitchburg, who contributes the most, I have never seen anything in Johnny Appleseed promoting the businesses unless the business is paid for, and I always thought that was unfair. I've had the same attitude for years. It hasn't changed as of today, because I haven't seen a change.
So I just want to comment to your first point about other communities. I think that's a good point. And we've certainly had conversations with those communities and trying to engage them and trying to get them involved. I'm happy to report that we've had very positive conversations this year, and it does look like Gardner will be joining the partnership in a more substantial way, and Devens will also be joining based on the conversations that we've had.
On another note, whenever I travel Route 2 east, my eyes are on that building. I have never seen less than 10 cars, 15 cars, 20 cars every time I've gone by. I think they're very successful. What I don't like is the other communities not chipping in to make it more successful.
Agreed.
Councilor Joseph.
I guess if we're putting another $18,000 into the marketing through the Johnny Appleseed, what are you putting into your budget as the mayor to market our city? What are you going to have more material? Is there somewhere in here that you help to increase marketing in the city through marketing material? I'm saying this $18,000 could go a long ways here in the city if you were to start getting things that we could be marketing ourselves here in the city instead of depending on somebody else who's representing, 10, 15 other communities to do marketing. What are we doing? Why wouldn't we take this $18,000 and promote ourselves?
Yeah, that's a good question, Counselor. I can say that we're driven toward the economic development initiatives that we're trying to engage in now. We've been on the job for 5 months. There's been a number of issues that we had to address. Our economic development director knows what the guidelines are, knows what my goals are. We're going to be moving forward. You're going to start to see some of those. We're focusing on the downtown area. We have been inundated, quite frankly, with businesses that are interested in coming into Fitchburg. I haven't had to market the city. The fact that we are an open city, that we're thinking big, and this is part of that, the chamber, and this is a collaboration. They can't do it all. We can't do it all by ourselves. But you're absolutely right. We're going to get better at marketing ourselves. We're working with, AJ, CGI. CGI is an organization that does videoing for the city, for cities. And is that through the Mayor's Association, the National Mayor's Association? We're a part of that. They're going to be coming into the city, dealing with the businesses in the city that will be marketed, and there's going to be a comprehensive video. I'm very excited about what it's going to look like. It's professionally done, and we've started that process about 3 weeks ago. When are they coming in, AJ?
They're going to be, the plan is they're going to be coming in soon, in the June to start filming.
Right.
All July.
And they'll.
I've spoken with several businesses, Pittsburgh State, to sign on to the programming.
Right. And we're going to be, you're going to see a pretty slick marketing campaign, and that's what we're hoping for. It's going to touch on our educational components, our recreational aspects, the fact that manufacturing is huge. 1 in every 4 payroll dollars is a manufacturing job, and it happens right here in Central Mass. That's the coordination that I've got, the relationship we have with the Chamber. They bring all the businesses, the manufacturing folks, the folks that are into tourism, the folks that are into the educational component. We all get together. The Advanced Manufacturing Organization out of Mount Wachusett Community College at Devens is an outstanding resource. We get in the room once a month with all of those businesses, all of the big businesses, the manufacturing folks in Fitchburg, that we're trying to draw and bring back, make them healthier. So those are the kinds of relationships that I think that we drive toward and that we've been making an effort on. And I'm hoping, and I know, that the Chamber, with Roy's assistance, is going to make us look even better. But people know we're here, and we're here to stay, and we're going to make advances in marketing the city of Fitchburg. We've already done that.
I guess I'd like to propose a cut of $9,000 to that budget, and that $9,000 to go to the economic development coordinator, for them to have materials to help market our city. If that's nowhere else in this budget, I'd like to see some money put there somehow, so that she has materials to market the city.
Council will certainly record your recommendation
Thank
for
you.
cut. Unfortunately, we don't get to choose where we
Right, I know.
allocate.
I know.
Unfortunately, only the mayor has authority to allocate those funds. I would just say, I've been a critic of this line item in the past, particularly after FY13, when we had few hotels driving our rooms tax, and tourism seemed at a kind of a low point. We seem to have few partner communities in the area. Now with Great Wolf driving over $1 million in revenue for the city through rooms tax, forced to revisit this. This is a substantial revenue generator, and they alone, if they're asking for it, seem that's a direct return on investment if that makes Great Wolf feel supported, and they should feel supported as a major revenue generator and a magnet for tourism in the area. We should support them. My hope, to I guess further Councilor Caddy's point, is that beyond Great Wolf, what else can we do for our small businesses, for our downtown? We've started spending more money and time on our infrastructure to upgrade, to improve our infrastructure, to accommodate small businesses, Fitchburg State University, to make ourselves a regional hub of culture and art. And with those efforts, I certainly hope that in addition to Great Wolf, we can start to push that. I also hope that we might be able to partner with those folks who are going up to Great Wolf by the scores, and really make them aware of what cultural assets and other business assets that we have in our downtown. So it'd be great to see if Great Wolf might be able to leverage their connection and goodwill with Great Wolf to see how we might be able to draw folks down the street and to see that it's not just Great Wolf New England or Great Wolf North Central, that it's Great Wolf in Fitchburg, and we have a great deal to offer. Thank you. Any other questions regarding the miscellaneous expenses? Councilor Joseph?
I guess I just want to make one comment, is every time I see a Great Wolf's commercial on TV, they don't even say they're in Fitchburg. Okay, come to Central Mass. Okay, they don't even say they're in Fitchburg. Why can't they at least say they're in Fitchburg? Are they that disappointed or disgusted with being in Fitchburg that they have to say that they're in Central Mass? It's just, I don't know, that just bothers me. So what does that do for us?
Councilor Donnelly.
Thank you. I want to just, 2014, the revenue, room tax revenue is 47,000. 2015, 937,000. 18,000 is a drop in the bucket. We cannot be isolationists and advertise just in Fitchburg. We need regional. We have to work with each other. One of the questions, and it's a regional attitude. Some of the city councilors were asked, how would you vote on a gas line? One councilor responded, well, it's not going to affect us. Well, it is. It's a regional answer, and we have to advertise our regional. I would suggest one thing for, as Councilor Joseph just said, Great Wolf advertises Central Mass or North Central. I keep wanting to advertise North Central Mass, because Central Mass is quite an area. I don't like North Worcester County. I like North Central Mass. I don't like Montechusett, a regional area. I mean, it's North Central Mass. But when you come off the highway from off Route 2, going to Great Wolf, I think there should be a sign there, welcome to Fitchburg. When you get off and you go to the stop sign, you got to go left or right. Welcome to Fitchburg, because Great Wolf does advertise without using Fitchburg. That'd be one of our greatest marketing things. I think we got to get over the hump. We got to be on the positive side. Regional marketing, maybe at some point in the future they'll consider, but it's North Central Massachusetts. We do have to think regionally. And 18,000, 50,000, out of 900,000 is a drop in a bucket. And that's what it's supposed to be for. Marketing, not just the general fund. Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
I believe the city needs all the help it can get, and I've never really understood, well, I understood it, but I disagreed with some of my colleagues about why this was always such a hot button topic. One of the councilors mentioned, you know, how do we see a return on our investment? That's a very good question to ask, obviously. But I believe that the chamber has gotten a bad rap over the last few years, and one example of that is what's going on right now today with the activity in West Fitchburg, with the developmental possibilities going on Main Street down by Moran Square area. And we're also seeing activity on Middle Main Street. There is a lot of things taking place that maybe the public's not aware of that wasn't taking place 5 or 6 months ago. I cannot quantify, nor do I think anyone can, what impact that was based on, that impact is based on with the chambers, how much of an impact the chamber had in those increases. But I'm sure they were a willing partner in marketing the city. So I see this as a supplemental marketing effort that we should utilize to our fullest extent, and we have seen positive benefits going forward with development early stages right now that I have not seen in my 8 years on this council up until now. And the chamber can only serve a purpose of helping us in that endeavor. And I remember Mary Jo Bohart, when she was before us during her confirmation, she did mention that the chamber has to be an arm-in-arm partner with the city, and there needs to be more investment with them, and she was going to work collaboratively with them to do that. I think the chamber has more of an outreach than the city, the Fitchburg itself, because the chamber understands more the economic region, the negatives and the positives. Also, you know, it's hard to quantify the benefit we get because there are a lot of things with our city that unfortunately we are at a disadvantage on, if for no other reason than geography. We don't have access to the highway really. We have the highest commercial tax rate in North Central Mass, and Unitil obviously is a noose around our neck. That's not the chamber's fault, that's not the mayor's fault, that's not the previous mayor's fault, it's just, that's the economic reality we're in. So additional investment in this area to me always made sense, but this is the first time in my 8 years here that I've seen the chamber president come before us and firmly commit to the city that there will be some benefits from it, and I know he knows this and the mayor knows this. We'll call him out on it next year if we don't see anything. But I'm sure the chamber, giving our input, will have quantifiable evidence next year of what they were able to accomplish with the added monies, but I've never heard of a commitment like this. To me, that means the partnership between the city and the chamber is stronger than it's ever been. So this is a step in the right direction. So I have no problem with this increase. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
You know, I'll say it again that I am a cheerleader for the Chamber of Commerce as it is today, because they are present, they are available, and they are, you know, when we have business meetings with lots of people coming into Fitchburg, the Chamber of Commerce.
Councilor, I'll just remind you, we have Johnny Appleseed Center in front of us. If you could
Sorry,
just restrict
okay.
your comments to Jada.
Well, I think they do a bang-up job, and I'm going to support moving forward in whichever direction they want to move in, because I believe that they will hold true to their word that that even next year the return on investment will be even larger. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Nascimento? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions regarding miscellaneous expenses? Seeing none, we'll move on to wastewater enterprise on page 46 through page 48. Good evening.
Evening.
All right. Begin. Is it just wastewater too? Okay. Okay. I'll just start here. We'll begin with wastewater enterprise personal services expense. Deputy Commissioner $91,142. Superintendent East Plant, $78,039. Civil engineer, 33%, $26,456. Collection system manager, $75,000. Office manager, $58,621. Business manager at 40%, $30,000.
Excuse me, Mr. President?
Yes.
And I apologize for
Yes.
interrupting you. Could we just possibly read the totals of the personal services and expenses?
Sure.
Having you go through each line item, you're gonna lose your breath by going, when we get to the police and the fire. So just a suggestion, you can do whatever you wish. I just,
Councilors have any concerns with that?
No.
Wonderful. I'd be happy to oblige that request. The total for personal services would be $2,223,325. Thank you, Councilor Unitelli. Any questions regarding wastewater enterprise personal services expense? Councilor Unitelli.
first, a general question on wastewater, which encompasses personal services. How much is in retained earnings?
Presently?
Yes.
Presently, it's approximately 7 million, I think, was the most recent certified.
So we're budgeting your enterprise fund to be a deficit of 1.2 million, and we're gonna use 1.2 million of retained earnings to prop it? Correct?
Correct.
Can you please explain to me how you're being able to afford another position when you can't afford what you got currently?
We're reducing the percent share on the civil engineer. Historically, the wastewater division or the enterprise has funded 75% of the civil engineer position. Based on the need and the services provided by that position, we're decreasing that from a 75% funding share down to a 33% funding share, split evenly between water, wastewater, and DPW.
What does the business manager's position have to do with the operations of the wastewater department and the sewer separation project and the water system upgrades and whatnot? Very, very general answer would be fine. I just want to know how, is wastewater not going to function if this position isn't in there?
Well, the best example I can give, I've got two very recent examples. The business manager can bring in grant dollars that I don't have the opportunity to pursue. I missed out on $30,000 of grant money for asset management. We very nearly missed out on 0% interest SRF loans for the upcoming SSU project, where we'd be eligible for up to $10 million on 0% interest as opposed to 2% interest. Over a 20-year term, that's approximately $150,000 annually. These are the types of things that the business manager can most help wastewater with.
Okay. When the rates were increased, and they will be increased again and again, and probably again, the increased justification was because that was what was required to pay off these massive loans that the federal government imposed upon us. I do not recall ever being given information, nor has the people who pay these bills, that this was going to fund new hires that have nothing to do with the federal mandate. So I have a problem with this. And I know the water department's here as well. He's getting a preview of coming attractions, because I made this point to him a couple months ago when we hit the residents on the other side of the aisle. I said to him, and I'm saying it again here, I was never going to support new hires in these enterprise funds, because neither of them on their current trajectory are sustainable. So, I know you're going to give us a good reason why you need it, and as I said earlier, I will never question the necessity for new positions. I question the affordability and the perception that it has in that public eye, because I've already had some people contact me about it, and they're absolutely right. And I know what's going to happen. If I push to have this cut, next year I'm going to be blamed that we missed out on tons of opportunities. I am trying to get the city into balance before we start going for extras. And I have to tell my constituents that they're now subsidizing a new position in water and wastewater because apparently them paying $100 a month for sewer and water isn't enough because we're such a prosperous community. So I have a problem with this, Mr. Morosky, and I'll get to the expenses in a minute, but I'm not trying, I know I sound like I'm being a hard individual with this, but when I see negatives, and I understand that we increased our revenues to support those negatives. For example, this says the projected spend in wastewater is going to be $10.9 million. The projected spend right now for FY16, with 6 weeks to go, is roughly $8.7 million. Now I know that there's some debt there, so let's round up conservatively. Let's call it $10 million. And I'll get to it with the expenses in a minute. I don't believe that you're going to spend $10.9 million. I don't believe it. So I want you to use as little retained earnings as possible to lessen the increase that's coming down the road that our residents have to pay. Because, no offense, I said it many years ago, I feel that in this department, we're going to be spend happy for years because they know they're getting increases every 4 or 5 years under the umbrella of the federal eggheads in Washington, D.C. So I am going to be very strict with this budget because I know there won't be a revenue problem. You're always going to get that money. I want you to use as little as retained earnings as possible because any amount of money you don't use out of retained earnings, you don't have to hose the people of the city of Fitchburg for the extra cash. So I know we're on personal services. I am not supporting the business manager's position on principle alone. But the expenses, I got a ton of questions on the expenses, especially the projected
We'll get to that,
costs.
Council.
Okay,
We'll
I'm just getting warmed up with this. But we're projecting a deficit of 1.2 million. My goal is going to be to try to lessen that deficit so you don't have to rely on free cash. I mean, on retained earnings, I'm sorry. And I'll get to that as we get to the expenses. I understand there's a need. You've made it quite clear. It's the principle of the matter, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Commissioner Laxo, could I ask you to chime in as well? I'd like to get a general sense, global perspective of this full position, because instead of hearing it in 3 different pieces from each perspective, can you talk about that from a global perspective, how that's going to help your department, how that'll help wastewater, how that'll help water, the overlap, and then I heard talk about grant funding as well. I think we've reached max capacity there.
It's fine. Yeah, I mean, we formerly had a business manager position within DPW. It was last held by Larry Casassa, and it's been vacant for the last few years. Then as a department head, I started to get concerned about some of the excessive hours that some of our people work every week, 20 hours a week overtime, 30 hours a week overtime without getting paid, uncompensated extra time. And it's not just once in a while, it's week after week, month after month, all year round. And, they're very good employees. They haven't complained about all the extra work, but, I don't want them to burn out. And most of the extra work is really created because of the additional projects created by the consent decree. I mean, it takes a lot of time to spend all this money, frankly. And we'll be facing the same thing in water with the water main replacements. That work is going to be continuing on for years. And on the general fund side, we've received some grants for flood hazard mitigation. I found out the hard way that there's a huge administrative burden when you get these grants because of all the quarterly reports and reimbursement requests, that are hundreds of pages a piece. So I felt that the best way to relieve the burden on these people is to, take away the financial piece so they can concentrate on the technical and engineering and managerial work, and bring in somebody who
can focus on the financial side, who has more of a financial background.
When you talk about grant acquisition and grant writing, do you have any sense of what a level of expectation for grants secured and total dollars raised that you'd either expect or could be reasonably expected?
Yeah, I can't really put a number on it, but I know there are new programs that the state is coming out with, on small bridge replacement that we could go after. There are also funds that recently became available for dam removal and dam repair. We can certainly go after those. So, that every once in a while there are new programs coming up that we should just try to take advantage of.
My only concern there, I certainly get excited when I hear about grants and possibly acquiring new funds, but certainly if the pool out there for us to acquire those, we should temper our expectations, I guess is what I'm saying here, of, if there aren't new grants out there, and we have been securing some or most of the potential funds, we need to be careful of getting too excited or ambitious about securing grants when it's realistic. We could be talking $10,000 or $20,000 to $30,000 of grants, but we're still paying $75,000, $80,000 for a position plus benefits. So that's certainly my concern. I appreciate that, Commissioner Laxo. Is there anyone else who has questions for Commissioner Laxo about this position before we turn this back to Jeff? Thank you.
Mr. President, can I say something regarding this position?
Please.
As I'm oftentimes reminded, this is the mayor's budget, and I had a lot to do with agreeing that this position is important. Matter of fact, if you look on your documentation, you'll see that this position existed back in FY13. Also, we often love to cite our neighboring cities and how well they do. Their position that exists today, I won't mention the city, but raises double the revenue, pays for itself, and brings in that revenue beyond that. So if we're concerned with efficiencies, this is the reason for this position. And this is why it's important that we go forward with this position. The grant issue, for instance, looking at, is available to both water, wastewater enterprise funds and the general fund, DPW, streets, parks, and engineering. This is not happening now. All right, so we're losing out on that. We need to look as a city for a grants coordinator just for the city, just for economic development. And I'd like to move forward with that at some point as well. So, I just think that this is, as Commissioner Moraski mentioned, we're missing out on some revenue components for some of the projects that we're engaged with, or not being engaged with, because we don't have this kind of a person. Now, again, we used to have that person. It was only a few short years ago. So I think this is something I'm hoping the council is going to support. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
I don't know, Mr. Moraski, when you actually sleep, because we see the emails at all hours of the night, the early morning. I just want you to remind the public again that we still are obligated by the consent decree, right? That we have a sewer separation problem and a wastewater problem that has to be addressed. I mean, we're not just making it up. I mean, we're bound to finish that project, correct?
That is correct. This particular position has more to do with alleviating the funding by grants, cost avoidance, cost efficiencies, which lower the expense side of the budget. So that's a lot to do with what this position is about, at least for wastewater.
I guess my question is, just like we asked about the return on investment for JADA and the Chamber of Commerce, so for a $40,000 investment, we're going to be able to make that up with finding grants or finding a different revenue source versus taxing the residents. Correct? Like you could look for other revenue streams if we had somebody that could just take care of the day-to-day business? Because I understand that your civil engineer, your chief engineer have to kind of oversee every project that happens? Is that correct?
They often function as a city liaison on the larger projects, so they're looking out for our best interests. Getting back to the example that I cited, it was in fact a conversation I had with another business manager from a neighboring city that brought to my attention that we should be eligible for that 0% interest on SRF borrowing. Just 1 year on an annual basis, that would more than pay off the salary of the business manager if we were saving in excess of $100,000 on payments, loan payments for borrowing on this one project.
Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
Well, I hope that we get savings that are in excess of what we overspent on the first round of loans, which was $9 or $10 million. Does anybody recall that a few months ago? When we were given this oops of $10 million? So, again, I'm gonna hear chapter and verse why everything's a necessity. The fact remains they can't afford what they're doing right now. I guess my problem is I think like a private individual. So, we're gonna save $100,000 and we're out of balance 1.2. Okay? And about the other city that we're talking about, they don't have the problems we do structurally. Thank you.
Any other further questions regarding personal services? Moving forward onto wastewater enterprise expense. Council's like a line-by-line delineation or total expense?
Total.
Total expense, $3,150,700. Questions by councilors? Councilor Di Natale.
First, I'd like to start with electricity. It says here the projected spend is $1,050,000. We've spent so far $576,000. So please explain to me how we're going to spend $500,000 in 6 weeks. Next line item, natural gas. Projected spend, $260. Current spend, $65. Please explain how we're going to spend $200,000 in 6 weeks. I can go down the list, Mr. Morosky. These projections are completely, in my opinion, way out of left field. They make no sense.
Gas is primarily attributable to heating facilities and also hot water at the East Plant. It was a relatively mild winter season, so we're anticipating that that is an over forecast on fiscal 16, but we can't anticipate that we'll have mild years in years going forward.
But we didn't, this back to my earlier point about the projection column. I get that it was done in January, but if I go back to the January file, we only spent $300,000 in January. Who decided that we're going to spend $1,050,000 with half the year done? It's important because this is the information we're given that the budget is based off of. This is saying we're going to spend $1,050,000 and the mayor's request is $1,050,000 to indicate there's no cut. We're not going to spend $1,050,000. We're going to spend at most $650,000. And I understand that budgets are budgets and things can change throughout the year, which then require over budgeting, under budgeting, because we can't tell the future. We're not soothsayers. We can't see the future. But it's hard for me to accept a budget of $1,050,000 for next fiscal year when we were under budget, not by $100,000 or $50,000. We're going to be under budget by almost $500,000. And yet I see on the page that we're in a deficit 1.2. My other question is sludge disposal. This is the last one I'll say because it's driving me crazy. Sludge disposal, ladies and gentlemen, says we're gonna spend $250. We've only spent $130 right now. We're probably gonna finish around $150, not $250. There are 3 accounts I'm looking at right now where we're going to underspend by almost $800,000, yet according to this document, we're gonna spend right on budget.
We're actually anticipating that that should come in closer to 200,000, so it's 60,000 under the projected number. We've had increased efficiencies of the plant operation, so we're anticipating that to be a lower cost. The polymer chemical is also linked with sludge, so we're anticipating that to be a lower cost as well.
Mr. Morosky, I understand the reasons that we're not gonna spend what we budgeted. My problem is the document we have says we're gonna spend it. Did we not know these things 3 months ago? 2 months ago? Last month, before we got this? Because I gotta be careful what I say here. It's not telling the true story. We're not gonna spend $1,050,000, so it shouldn't say $1,050,000. We're not gonna spend $250,000, it should say $200,000. So I strongly recommend the finance team and the mayor, going forward, please update this document, because a lot of these numbers are, they're not off 5 or 6% or even 10. They're off like 50, 60%. And we're basing next year's spending on that projected column. So as far as I'm concerned with wastewater, I have no idea what you guys are gonna spend next year. None. But this says we're gonna be in the hole $1.2 million. I would venture to guess we're gonna be in the hole maybe half that number. I have more, but I think I made my point. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
I do have one question on the line item of architectural and engineering. FY16 projected of $6,000, FY17 requested $193,700. Is that based on project load or a particular project or a particular engineering issue?
This was a line item in the budget that was created within the fiscal 16 to support an engineering services need in support of the anaerobic digestion project. So it's an A&E account that is within the expense portion of the budget for support needs. You would know, one point of emphasis, the industrial pretreatment account, you'll notice that went down from 46,000 down to 12,000. That fee was reallocated to this A&E account. This A&E account also is going to be funding other engineering services in support of the wastewater expense.
And that's at the West plant, correct? That's moving forward with turning that into an anaerobic digester?
This is for the enterprise-wide, not just for the East plant, the West plant, or the collection system. This particular line.
Encompasses all those projects?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add, not to belabor the point, Councilor Di Natale spoke about electricity and natural gas. With regards to natural gas, I shared the same concern with $176,000 remaining in the account. I look at past prices in FY14 and FY15, the cost continued to go down, while this year we know gas prices continue to go down, even with a projected $200,000 as an updated projection. For us to project an extra $60,000 over this year just seems a little bit out of line, both with the trend that we've experienced as well as where we are to date. I'm not an expert in gas fluctuations, so I would feel uncomfortable at this point in the year projecting both the temperature and the price of natural gas for next year, but certainly I do feel that is high. I'll also add that electricity, however, seems fairly in line with 2 out of the 3 past fiscal years, with FY14 being an outlier. We've exceeded $1,050,000 in FY13, FY15. Electricity has, I believe, gone up since that time. So I don't see the FY17 requested amount as being excessive, despite the discrepancy this year, because we do see an outlier both in 14 as well. But I'd rather budget for what's two out of the past 3 years for what we've actually spent. Thank you. Any other councilors wishing to speak? Councilor Di Natale.
Mr. President, you make a good point, that there are some outliers. I'm not disputing that. What I'm disputing is what I've been given that serves as a basis for next year. It's not accurate. It's not even accurate to 50%. So if you take all the expense accounts in wastewater this fiscal year, they are projected to underrun every single account in total by $900,000. But let's be conservative. Let's say it's $700,000. That means this document that says they're going to spend 2,961, they're going to, if the projections hold, and that's why I add like 10% on top of the projections, they're really going to spend $2.1 million. Add 10%, maybe 2.3. It's unbelievable how off this is. And we base our revenues on these accounts. So when we go to the taxpayer and say, hey, we're not taking enough from you, let's take some more because we need it, this is telling me we don't. Outlier or not, and I understand better than anybody that budgeting requires some guesstimates. But when you're off this amount, I would be doing a disservice if I didn't raise this. I mean, it's glaring. It's almost $1 million off. So please, if it's an outlier, that's one thing. I'm not so much questioning the mayor's proposal in 17. I'm questioning the projections for 16 that the mayor based his proposal on. The basis of estimate is fallacy. I can't wait to see water and the airport next. Our glorious enterprise funds. Thank you.
Any further questions for wastewater enterprise expense? Seeing none, we'll proceed to wastewater enterprise reimbursement to the city. We need to do it. Okay, we'll do it. We have a subtotal reimbursement to city in the amount of $950,000. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to wastewater enterprise debt service. Subtotal debt service, $4,520,000. Questions from councilors? Seeing none, wastewater enterprise capital expenditures, subtotal of $600,000. Questions from councilors? Seeing none, I believe that concludes our budget session this evening. Before we adjourn, if there's no other budget-related matters for this evening, I'd just like to take the opportunity first to thank Fitchburg State University for graciously hosting us for this evening's budget session during a scheduling conflict with our normal site. I'd like to thank FATV, certainly, and those employees who are covering multiple events this evening for being able to accommodate our schedule and for being able to staff this with additional staffing needs. I'd also like to thank the department heads, not just those who presented tonight, but those who will follow in the couple of weeks to come. I'd like to acknowledge the fact that this is above and beyond. Yes, I realize this is a part of your job duties and responsibilities, but I appreciate that you're here with us past 8 o'clock, and some will be here until 10 o'clock, I have no doubt, throughout budget season. So thank you for your time, your energy, your efforts. We certainly need them in the days and years to come. That said, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion, second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. You're adjourned.
I recorded all the times of Finch. What happened? George was listening to tonight. Assessors started at 6, went to 6:22.
Oh.
keep a record, I'll send this to you, so that when, if we budget session together, you know, we kind of have an idea of what each department is
Oh,
going to
no,
have.
that's great idea, Jim.
So then that way, when you're trying to plan it.
Oh, that's great.
You know, like tomorrow night, I bet you.
Oh, Brimfield, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, tomorrow
So,
night.
if I'll keep record of it, and I'll give it to you, but then we, from year to year.
Which was slightly deliberate to give ourselves a,
Right.
because we had projected that, the administrator yesterday would keep us
Great.
busy.
Yeah, great.
So,
I think it'll work.
Yeah.
Essentially, other than 45 minutes ago.
I have little pictures. David was nice enough to
Oh, to bring them. David, thank you for setting up. I actually meant to thank you, but I apologize for not.
Hello. Thank you. For what? She's taking these.
Oh, she can take those now.
Thank you.
Sorry, yes, I am. Yeah. Oh, I'll just carry. I've got my briefcase. Yep. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, if I did this one, as long
I was in a meeting, just got out.